an equal and wish a better replacement to the person of Yona
Rwanga.
Yeah.
Ndugu Wako, good morning.
Morning, viewers. And I think my big event of the week is President Yoweri Museveni coming out to give hope to those in the education sector, especially the teachers, the parents and students, that actually, yes, there is hope. Because he talks of 1st November, tertiary institutions, post-secondary schools actually will be ready to begin, and as early as January, then the rest of the classes.
Majority of the people discussing and talk about that are actually saying, is it true that by January 2022, we will be ready as a country for the opening up? Now, remember the president is talking about vaccination. If we can't vaccinate up to about 4.8 million Ugandans, then it will be safe for all of us. How about now, back to the schools themselves? Once we are vaccinated, we do not need to put into place the other measures also, because that's also something that we need to look into.
No, I think the experts have been very clear that even when you're vaccinated, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't put the other measures.
You throw the SOPs.
Yes, the SOPs. Because ideally not everybody will have vaccinated at that time. Yeah, but at least the vaccination gives us hope and reduces on the risk. Yes, or even it increases our chances of containing the pandemic. Yeah, but that said, of course, the pandemic in Uganda has hit seriously the education sector, and that is why perhaps when he came out to talk about it, he gave it was some kind of relief, yes, to those who are grappling with the loans, how to pay back the loans. Yes, the teachers actually, others have run out, others have actually abandoned the profession. Yeah, so now it's giving some hope that look here, no, by January, and even giving time to schools to prepare, so that come January they shouldn't say that perhaps the time that was given was not enough to put all what is required in place.
Okay, thank you very much. You also want to say something before I get into?
The number of players. I think people have been looking at government, particularly looking at President Museveni when he should say what he should say. But I think it's because even if President Museveni wanted to have schools opened now,
Yesterday,
it is not going to be possible. For the simple reason is that we'll have to have a threshold, the number of people who will have been vaccinated. Now, when you look at the number of people as a benchmark, if the number of people who will have been vaccinated by that time, talk of November, against those who will not have been vaccinated. We're also looking at the number of the availability of the vaccines in the country, but also the willingness, because there are people, even now, when there are vaccines in some stations for people to go and get vaccinated, the response sometimes is very slow. So it is it's not a one-end thing that every person, schools have to get involved to ensure that the majority of teachers are vaccinated. The local leaders have also to get involved to ensure that the people in their areas are vaccinated. So I think it is a bigger effort, but we need to work together so that the schools, the local leaders, the government on the other side, the central government, the health department, so that we by that time have achieved the numbers that need to be vaccinated for the country to eventually be opened. Another person was telling me, say, but you are talking about schools, you are forgetting. I says, when will the president open up the bus so that we can get away from the lockdown back at home? Exactly.
So, okay. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. And now you just talked about President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and just last week you saw penned a very good and long article on coups. And I want us to talk about coups this morning on our Pan-African Friday. Now, remember in 2013, when the African Union launched the Africa Agenda 2063, one of the things as a flagship project they put in the agenda was the silencing of the guns. And to be precise, the entire year of 2020 was actually a year for the AU to silence the guns. But remember that at the heels of launching the Africa Agenda 2063, we had some coups in 2013, some failed coups, some attempted and failed coups, but subsequently from 2013 until this particular month here, we've had about 15 coups on the continent, those that have succeeded and of course those that have also failed, but just the attempts themselves in the wake of trying to silence the guns. Here is where we are today. Are we starting to think that again coups could be a fashion for this particular century in as far as changing power, taking away governments and doing all these things, because we've seen them in Guinea, Conakry, we've seen them in the Gambia, we try to see this in Ethiopia, we've seen this in Egypt, we've seen it in Comoros, we've seen it in Libya, in the Sudan, we've seen it in Burkina Faso, we've seen it in Burundi, we've seen it in Chad, we've seen these things happening. In just 2013 to date, we're not even talking about 10 years, and the agenda to silence the guns seems to be failing. Where are we and what do we need to do?
Well, looking at the coups on the African continent, you know, the other time the former president of Ghana, John Mahama, was saying that we need to bury the military ghost. Yes, and he was actually concerned that the ghost is the military ghost in the politics of Africa is actually being resurrected, and therefore that all efforts must be put together so that the ghost is really buried once and for all. But let's look at coups in Africa. The coups in Africa, there is one constant coups, that the coups are always orchestrated by people who are very close to the presidency. That is one constant. That there are those people who are actually trusted by the presidency that carry out these coups. Coups are always by very trained, highly trained and educated actually military persons, because in the 60s people would say maybe the likes of Amin, but they did not go to school, perhaps they could easily be influenced. But now these, you find that the coups are being carried out by very trusted cadres, very trusted military officers of those particular regimes. You remember what happened in Zimbabwe when Comrade Mugabe was actually overthrown. Whereas he was being forced to, they wanted the world to believe that the man was resigning. It was NUPF pushing him out, but it was very clear that it was a coup. It was very clear that it was a coup. So the same thing that just happened in Guinea Conakry. You realize that Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya was a trusted, not only trusted, a tribesman to Professor Alpha Conde. Yes, they come from the same area, they come from the same tribe, they come from the same clan, and he had all the reason to believe him. Yeah, he sent him out for military training in France. And actually, he promoted, just like you saw during Obote's time, when the likes of Wito Jok, the likes of Smith Opono Chak were promoted very fast. So it's the same thing that happened in Guinea Conakry between Alpha Conde and Doumbouya, and here we are now.
Ndugu Mtuta here, you notice that in 2014, another Lieutenant Colonel, Yakubu Zida, also led the coup that overthrew President Compaoré in the Burkina Faso. Sometime this month, I think in 2015, they also brought, they actually installed another president called Kafando. And I think a week later, they tried to overthrow Kafando. Now, the one who was again overthrowing Kafando was Brigadier, I think, Gilbert Diende of the Presidential Guard again. Now, Brigadier of the Presidential Guard was also trying to overthrow Kafando, even when, of course, that failed, and they again reinstated President Kafando. But just looking at that, when we saw in Burkina Faso still that after Kafando, we now again got President Roch Kabore. Roch Kabore came, they tried that again against him, even when he went through an election. What are we solving in this particular issue? Because we're now seeing military coups again, having some fashion back on the continent. Isn't this worrying our progress as Africans, Mututa?
The other mistake that people sometimes make, and I saw last time when Domboye took over Guinea, you saw the streets, people were celebrating,
chanting and singing and jubilating.
But then when you looked at the type of people who were celebrating, then you could also tell there was a problem. Because it was a tense situation, but you could see these young men and young women jumping on the trucks and the jeeps of the soldiers, and then you can easily relate it to the problem of Africa. But now the opposition, you can look at the pictures that you see people who are celebrating, then you know there must have been a problem.
And this is coming shortly after an election.
Yes.
Because they just had an election, I think, in
2020.
In 2020,
yeah,
yes.
After it was October 2020.
Sometime in December, I think, October, December. They just had an election, yes.
And then you see that there was a problem with even during the elections. Now, the problem here is not that the army is making anything new, because we have lived with coups in Africa anyway. But you are looking at what happens. That is the question that many people don't ask. What happens after now? The opposition were excited knowing that, look, they have been choosing president for the rigging of election. Of course, there was no there was no proof of that. And when the takeover happened, they were so excited. And we also saw this happen in Sudan when President Bashir was removed. The opposition was very excited. But what happens, and many other countries, but what happens now is that the opposition actually realizes they were the biggest loser in that takeover. Because, like in Guinea now, the opposition are being told that you could be part of the negotiations for the transition government, but you don't have decisions to make. It's not you to call the shots. And those who are in government are also being told, well, we shall see those who were not against anti-people and will be involved. Now, what I'm saying is sometimes what we intend to avoid to look at is the consequences that come with some of these takeovers. When you look at the issues and events that are now unfolding in Guinea, you realize that Guinea is on a time bomb. It's a matter of time you could have even another takeover in that country. And we have seen this. We saw what happened in Sudan. They attempted coup again.
Exactly.
Why? Because those who thought had taken over power and had removed the power from the dictator now.
The problem was Bashir.
Yes.
And when they thought they'd solved the problem,
they realized
they didn't have an answer.
They have a bigger problem now.
They have bigger problems.
When they started being clobbered by the military and the police, is when they realized that, well, they didn't even have the power to do that.
Isn't this something that is in Libya, for example? When you look at Libya 5 years after the overthrow of brother Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, in 2016, there was a failed attempted coup by, I think, the former ex-prime minister, Fayed, against the government now at Libya. But even when you just look at that, when they were fighting to overthrow Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, they were together, they were united. Now, after the fall of Gaddafi, this is when again we see coups and attempted coups against one another. The common enemy that time was Gaddafi. What united them against Gaddafi that cannot unite them now for this country called Libya? And I think this is where we're having a problem. Do we look at ourselves as the continent of Africa, and more so the African Union, as being able to address, and when we talk about silencing the guns, isn't this just a mantra that is far from reality?
No, I can say it's not far away from reality, because a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So it's a question of having a mechanism, having legislation, having policies, having the will. And then, of course, the commitment can come much later. But at least there must be, the African Union must be seen to be doing something. Now, when you go to how people ascend to power, you can ascend to power through a guerrilla war, a very successful guerrilla war. You can ascend to power through an election. You can ascend to power through a coup. You can ascend to power through death, like of course we've seen. Maybe the sitting president passes on, you're the vice president, or you're the next in line, and you find yourself there. So those are ways how people ascend to power. Now, because of the nasty experience with the coups we had on the African continent that had been sponsored by the imperialists, I think there was a thinking that no, enough is enough, let us democratize. Let us put a process through which anyone with political ambitions can utilize to ascend to power. And once that process is suffocated, then definitely you call for the alternative means. Now, I think in where we've seen coups is that you've seen that the civil and accepted way of people with ambition to ascend to power is suffocated. It's suffocated in a sense that perhaps you find that the constitution is amended without consulting the people, like what happened in Guinea. That Condé amended the constitution to provide for a third term without doing enough groundwork. You see, in some other countries, constitutions are amended, but there is enough groundwork to mobilize the people to look at the good in amending the constitution, and people, you move with it. But this is not what Condé did. Then I also see what is actually going to happen, like for the case of Guinea. If Mamadi is not careful, the country may actually plunge into a tribal clash, because we have the Mandika have actually dominated politics right from the days of Sako Toure up to now to Mamadi.
Yeah,
all these people are from the same tribe.
The Mandika
Now, and
is
yet,
the biggest there.
yes, and yet the biggest tribe there are the
And
Fulani.
you think it's an entitlement to them, maybe?
No, actually they have a sense of entitlement. Now the biggest group who are the Fulani feel that they've actually been left out.
They are marginalized.
They are marginalized, and which is the biggest tribe, which is actually very a big mistake on the side of the Mandika. So that actually may really plunge the country into that if Mamadi does not play his cards
very well. You wanted to say something, Dugum?
Yeah, but I also realized that, like I said, Guinea, it's a matter of time. They could be heading for a bigger problem than we know now, and even what they expect. Because I was following the discussion. You know, the African Union had wanted to have a discourse, an interaction, a discussion with the new leaders of Guinea. And when President Tshisekedi sent an envoy to the new leadership, the guy said, if you are talking of us being unconstitutional by taking over power, where were you when Conte was amending the constitution to provide for the third term? Now, that gave me a thinking is that, look, I think there's going to be a lot of tension in this country, and this guy is going to drive this country according to what advice he's getting by his colleagues.
Can he survive without the African Union?
He can.
Does he think he can survive without the African Union?
He can, because there is also the other issue of being supported by the external forces.
And
So-
to be specific, France.
Exactly. So it is likely they could have pushed him with an agenda. They can try to keep him there as long as he will remain necessary for them.
For the agenda.
Yes, but you also realize that back at home, France is also facing its own issues. So that relationship can only last as long as the people who are in power in France and the segments of the population of France that supported him still continue to benefit from the resources of Guinea. Now, other than that, he will have a problem. But at the same time, he is disconnecting himself from the would-be leaders of the country, and he seemed to be taking advice from his close allies, those who he had had in the army, and those he has grown up in the ranks. So that is likely to disconnect him from the rest of the leadership of the country, the politicians who have been there, and other leaders. Now, when you look at some of the problems that they had, the thinking is that President Conte had allowed a lot of other people to come into the leadership of that country, but had also given a leeway to resources access to some of the people who some like now the new leadership thought was being so generous, but also because of that leeway that has given access to these other people, there was a lot of corruption. And the thing now is that the new leadership is saying, no, we are going to stamp out corruption by doing so many things. But when you look at the lifestyle that they have already started, this guy seemed to be so flamboyant, like the name suggests. So, yes.
So his name is flamboyancy.
So I see the more problems coming in, and even the resources.
Okay.
I see the exploitation now being in the hands of foreigners more than the people of Guinea.
Don't we, can't we imagine of a situation like that which was in Zimbabwe, I think in 2017, when we saw General Constantine Chiwenga also overthrowing I beg your comrade Gabriel Robert Mugabe, and of course now bringing back President Emerson Mnangagwa, who they actually gave power to. They organized an election, then Mnangagwa comes back, he starts government, and you know, life goes by and by. But remember that when that time happened, or when all those events happened in 2017, we of course saw the African Union still coming out to say what they want to say. And to also remind General Chiwenga and the forces in Zimbabwe that the African Union had actually outlawed military coups and that there would be no recognition. Do you think that's why the Chiwengas had to give it back to Emerson Mnangagwa, and now Doumbia here needs to do the same thing to pass the baton over to now a civilian leader in a way to sanitize the coup from what possibly all of us are discussing?
No, I think the situation in Zimbabwe was a little bit different because Zimbabwe is a country that has never experienced any military coup.
Of course, all countries do not experience. It just starts.
No, with Guinea, with Guinea that has been the overlay.
But because one started, it has a history.
Yes,
but one starts. Then the
but when you go to Zimbabwe, they didn't have that history. And the other issue, of course, there was the SADC. You know, SADC at that time are very strong, and of course Mugabe was not such a person that you'd easily push away, and then you come in as a military, and you think you'll get away with it. Then also the level of political maturity, I think, in Zimbabwe is high as compared to Guinea. So all those perhaps could have intimidated the Chiwengas to take it up, and perhaps tried to dress it up as if it was something from ZANU-PF. It was ZANU-PF throwing out Mugabe, and indeed it did work. But in the case of West Africa, then also secondly, in Southern Africa, they've not had a very nasty experience with the cause as West Africa. Actually, West Africa, almost because you from the Guinea, you look at Ghana, you look at Nigeria, you look at Mali, Ivory. Almost every country there has experienced a military coup. But when you go to Southern Africa, actually you'll find that very, very few, actually, very, very few have had coups.
But at the same time, you also realize that for the case of Zimbabwe, that the people who were in power just shifted, that they maintained more or less the same group of the compatriots of Mugabe. Those he had fought with, those he had worked with, those he had grown up with. Now, in Guinea, there is a generation shift, that you are throwing away the old guards, and then you are coming in with more relatively educated and younger people who may not necessarily be well versed with the leadership, including Domboya himself. As a soldier, it's very easy to take orders, and you like Wana was saying, soldier, you can take orders and you can execute them to the letter. But when it come to issuing those directives, there could be a problem. Now, this gentleman is well educated, is a disciplined soldier, but now he, of course, when you talk of discipline, that can also be understood in one context or the other. But now, who are you going to work with? Are you going to work with those who have been in government, or are you coming with your own people because of that? Now, that is going to have a lot of suspicion and discrepancies, because are you going to work with those who are in opposition? Are you going to have people to come together? Is your transition government going to be purely military, so that then you can hand over to the other people when it comes to the civilian after elections? Or are you going to also to participate even in the elections, so that you also in the next government? So all this brought together means that this particular leadership is going to have a very shaky start. Until maybe at the time when they consolidate to be able. But if they are not even willing to work with either the SADC, they are not willing to work with the African Union, because they are and ECOWAS rather, they are trusting those who have sponsored them, then you realize there's going to be a very big problem.
Talking about the regional blocks that you're discussing here now, the SADC was, of course, very key and pivotal in the 2017 Zimbabwe affairs. You saw in 2016 when President-elect that time, Adama Barrow, also beat Yahya Jammeh in an election, which, of course, Yahya Jammeh had consented to before retracting that to say, no, it was this or that. You saw how ECOWAS came in at the time to help now install Adama Barrow as the president of the Gambia. In 2013, there was an attempted coup against Idris Deby before he actually gets killed on the battlefront this year, in 2021. Just looking at these other issues happening, especially on the continent, come to our region here, where we have the East African community and also IGAD at the same time. Do we even think that maybe the change of governments is what will solve the problem? Because wherever these things keep happening, you see the people coming onto the streets, jubilating, chanting, singing, dancing, saying, yes, we now have maybe saviors or a savior. And to their disappointment is that years down the road, things either get more worse, they get bad, they get, you know, it's the utopia that we expect when all these things are happening don't seem to be playing out. Let's look at the regional bodies themselves. Away from the economic integration, which seems to be taking faster strides, do we look at them as being able to help and manage issues on the continent, especially when it comes to coups of sorts, whether successful or failed?
Well, first of all, is that these regional bodies, they are economic bodies.
Exactly.
In other words, the foundation of their formation
is based on economic integration.
Is based on economic integration.
Why do we keep invoking them now when there are issues like that? So
when it is on economic integration, I think the issue is the new leadership affecting the economic relations between that country and the rest of the region. If it's not, then the coup will always pass. So regardless of how the people have come in power. So I would rather that maybe these integrations move faster to political integrations, so that really it becomes easier. Now, for the case of Yahya Jammeh and Gambia, Gambia is such a small country. Gambia is just surrounded by one country, that is Senegal.
Senegal.
Yes, it's just it's just surrounded by Senegal, and a very small country. So implying that even Senegal alone would easily put Gambia to order. You get it? So that's why it was easier for the forces there to prevail on Yahya Jammeh.
Yahya Jammeh took oath of office from Senegal.
Yes, yes.
He went to Senegal to swear in.
No, that is the...
sorry, Adama Barrow.
Adama Barrow. Yes, but so you see that this country alone was enough to put them to order. So that is the situation. But I tend to think that in most cases, these laws work for the weaker brothers. That the weaker brothers, it's easier for the bigger brother to bring them to order. But once it is the bigger brother actually in a mess, they will always be shouting, and it just ends there. Because we've just had in Mali, and ECOWAS it seems not to be doing anything. But if it was perhaps a smaller country, you can see in Burkina Faso, in Ivory Coast, all these things are happening. So I tend to imagine that if we could move faster from economic regional bodies to political regional bodies in terms of a confederation, not a federation, in terms of a confederation, then it becomes easier for perhaps when there is a coup for people to prevail on them. Okay. Now the issue of when you look at Doumbouya, Mamadi, I tend to look at him as somebody who's following in the footsteps of Lansana Conte. Yes, Lansana Conte was also a military person who took over through a coup and ruled the Guinea for about 24 years. So he's a young man, well educated. Now, if he can easily get the opposition on his side and have the youth on his side, I think it will be a done deal. Yeah.
You know why we need to look into these things closer? Because when you get to Burkina Faso, for example, the overthrow of Compaoré, Blaise, the people, the Burkinabe, thought that possibly that solved the problem. You saw them go, the burning down parliament, and doing lots of all the things. And now they brought a president, Kafando, Michael Kafando, who they actually tried to overthrow, then again brought him back, until when they organized an election that brought Marc Roch Kabore. Now, he went through that election until I think last year, sometime they had an election again. Last year, with the time Tanzania had elections, they also had an election, and of course the president was given another term. But amazingly, when you look at the country, for example, Burkina Faso itself, is that you have the president, Marc Roch Kabore, the elected president. But again, they'll tell you, northern region is headed by some other person. This is, you know, and at the end of the day, you look at a country, of course, after Blaise Compaoré, you do not have a country that is knit together. You have a country that has a president, but not the president of everything and everyone in the country. Where do these put us, Ndugu Mtuta? Especially looking at the African Union that, of course, keeps promising us and giving us all these very good niceties. And now, having the head of the summit, a new president on the block, but also with issues back home. Now, Doumbouya comes up and even says, when this was happening, ulikuwa wapi? Ulikuwa wapi? Ulikuwa wapi? And asking all these questions.
Exactly. But also, that underlying line also needs to be looked at. That if these coups are to be avoided, and if these guns are to be silenced, first of all, we need to look at the actors. Who are the actors in these guns? Because we don't manufacture guns in Africa.
No.
But these guns are coming from somewhere.
We're the biggest market actually of guns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is that who are the participants? Because if African Union, and when you are talking about African Union, is that the heads of state are going there and sitting down and their foreign ministers and passing these resolutions. But these are not the people who possess the guns. The people who hold these guns and who use these guns to take over governments are not there in those meetings. So how do you discuss issues of the people who are, so what is the policing after that? How do we police to ensure that there is no gun violence? It means you have also to come in with an equal measure, that if you have a gun, then we shall go for you. Which means that the African Union has to have a standby force to handle issues like this one. That tomorrow, any person thinking about it will think twice. Because you overthrow a government, an elected government, then we are coming for you, and you'll not be able to stand. But now the guy is telling them, okay,
it should be an African Union thing,
Yes.
and not neighbors.
yes,
I actually, I need the rest of us to look and say, it's in East Africa, so EAC, where are you? It's in West Africa, so ECOWAS, where are you? It should be an
Exactly.
African thing. Say,
yes, should be an
yes,
African issue.
that if there's a coup, a successful one like it was in Guinea Conakry, then the AU headquarters are Addis Ababa.
Yes, we'll dispatch.
The force.
Exactly. Now, if that doesn't happen, then you see this guy answering them the way he wants.
Okay.
That shouldn't be allowed.
Okay.
Now, the other thing is that also, other than the guns, also what happens is the tampering with the constitutions within the African country, African continent, should also be addressed. That the African Union should vet the necessity of this amendment of some of these constitutions, so that you can say, no, this amendment is necessary, these changes are necessary.
Maybe
as we wind up with paving a fall.
they are popular. You know, they could be,
Exactly.
they could be necessary, but not popular.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, I just expect that we stop this discussion here for today. For our Pan-African Friday, we've cut it short for an hour, or by 1 hour, but we promise that next week on a Friday we'll still return and talk about quite a number of issues on the continent of Africa. We're stopping this year for this morning, as we also set stage and pave way for the conference, the third annual conference of Uganda Cancer Institute and the Palliative Care Association,
Which is also an African Union, because cancer is also now an African problem.
Yes, exactly,
Yes.
which is also an African problem. So we stop this year for now, thanking my comrades and colleagues here, Akol Mandi Amazima and Ndugu James Imututa, the Pan-African Friday team. We'll return next week on Friday. My name is Jagan Asemakola. Ziksoka, blessings and good morning.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Getting GoTV